Feed TV. Three corners of horror. I am Ricky Grimes. We all cheer for big bottles of beer. Thank you for joining us once again. We got something a little different today, but before we get into that, JR, what's going on, brother?
Not much, man. Seems like we like to travel a lot to the woods. I mean, here's another one, but a lot different than what we're used to.
Yeah, Joe, what's up, man?
What's up? Welcome back. Thank you for joining us. This is going to be a little bit different one. It's probably going to be, actually, this is one that we've all seen for the actually first time. So we're reviewing a movie that is not something that everyone has seen. So this is a fresh perspective from all three of us.
Awesome. Before we continue, smash that like button. Please subscribe and hit the bell icon to enable notifications. We would greatly appreciate that. So let's get going. And this film is called In the Earth. This one is going to be a little polarizing in the way where everyone's going to have their own like kind of interpretation of what they saw, but that's not always a bad thing. So let's get going. The film takes place during a global pandemic. Sound familiar? So good guy Martin, who is a scientist played by Joel Fry, arrives at a quarantine check and is quickly tested for any infections. Here we learn he battled a case of ringworms at some point. After Martin is cleared, he meets Alma, a park ranger played by Laura Torsha, who will accompany Martin on a routine equipment run that will take us, the viewer, through the beautiful, lush environment, yet a very mysterious world that In the Earth takes place in. JR, what's going on? Tell me, please. This film, discuss the world, the current situation, and exactly what the hell is going on, like, to begin with.
Like you said, all too familiar. There's obviously something going on in the world. All these folks are used to being quarantined. Like you said, when he arrives in the lab, I mean, you see these massive signs about social distancing. If you're sick, don't pass this line. The minute he passes the line, he gets hosed down. I mean, it's kind of funny how you got to go into quarantine, go into isolation, but kind of the woods are an interesting place for isolation. I mean, what do you think, Joe?
Well, yeah. So ironically, we're reviewing a movie that has to do with a deadly virus that has ravaged the world. In this movie, the scientists are hoping to find a cure. One of the things that is throughout the movie is they use hopefully I'm pronouncing it right. It's mycorrhiza. It's a process of using fungi to help increase the crop growing. And this is where they hope to find a cure. And this is where also we're going to meet one of the big characters of the movie, Dr. Olivia Wendell, who is doing the work in the woods.
Yeah, when I first popped this film in and I started watching it, the scene where Martin arrives, getting hosed down, like you mentioned, and the fact that everyone's wearing their masks and stuff, that really hit home. This was actually filmed during COVID, I believe in Ireland, and during peak COVID at that. And you could tell relatively small cast. They're out in the middle of nowhere, which is great for filming something during the pandemic. But I think they did a really good job off the bat establishing the environment. Like the sound is especially jumps at you real quickly. Just the sound of the birds chirping in the background and the ambiance that is created throughout the entire film. It gives you this sense of like you're out there. But sometimes, if you really notice, it gets pitch. It's just quiet. It's completely silent. You don't hear anything. And I think that the sound in the film, I wish I kind of saw this in the theater, like to get that total experience.
Yeah.
Because the visuals are not nothing to laugh at either. The visuals are really nice. I got a little problem with the editing as far as it's a little jarring at times, but other than that, I think it looked beautiful. It sounded great. I was quickly into the story because of our current situation. I think everyone can relate to what Martin was going through going into that checkpoint.
It gave you a little familiarity to what we're all going through right now.
Absolutely.
So it's kind of one of those things that we've been all sitting at home. You know, yes, we've been finally going out a little bit more, but still it's not the same as before. So it's a little familiarity, and in a sense of where you can actually see yourself, you know, in this kind of situation.
What's nice too, they don't tell you what the virus is or what it does. you're just thrown in there, and because of what we've been going through, we kind of figured, okay, well, we know what this is already, so let's
Yeah.
not waste any time with that. It's not this story. It's not about the virus per se. That's the world they're living in, but this story isn't about that. So I kind of like the fact that they kind of didn't waste too much time with that. But we do got two essential characters, like I mentioned, Martin and Alma. Well, I found both of them to be really interesting. I think they had really good chemistry too in the film. Gr, what do you got to say about these two characters, Martin and Alma?
I kind of veer towards Alma. I mean, here you have a park ranger who, I mean, this is her life. And the minute she meets Martin, you kind of already guess that there was some. I mean, there was good chemistry, but there was a lot of questioning she had. I mean, she really didn't trust him. Even as they're walking, she kept asking him questions. You know, about the, Olivia, how you know the doctor, what's your research? Even as they're walking in the woods, she always, every time they had a conversation, it was always left the camera going back to her and her having this little perplexed look on her face. Like, can I really believe, what he's saying? I mean, later on in the story, you kind of know why, because she knows more about him than is being led to believe. But her character, I mean, she talks about, the folklore, which we'll talk about later, and how, back in the 70s, kids were missing. So she knows a lot about this forest, and she knows a lot about the people who are in and out of the forest, even the institute they belong in, which is why she constantly questioned, how come the institute, didn't send you first?
Well, and we also meet Martin Laurie. He's one of the scientists that's working on the cure to whatever's been going on in the world right now. And he is sent to an outpost run by Dr. Olivia Wendell, who is doing experiments on fungus called hyphae. Again, I hope I pronounced that one right. We also come to find out that Martin and Olivia are former research partners, and not just that, but lovers. So that he's obviously there for a personal reason, not just there for scientific research. And also, JR, because you had mentioned Alma. Alma is the first to inform Martin that they haven't heard from Olivia in months, literally before they go out there. So that already gives you a sense that we're going into something is wrong at this outpost.
Something is array within these woods. Yeah, I Martin, especially, I don't know what it is. I was so distracted watching this. I kept telling myself, I know this guy. I've seen this guy before.
Me too.
Where is he from? But then I looked it up, and he's from Game of Thrones. So he was in
Who did he play in Game of Thrones?
He was in the city where they had the slaves, where
yes.
Daenerys freed all the slaves.
Oh, yeah. I totally know what you're talking about now.
Yes, exactly. That's what I said. Yeah.
As I'm watching, I'm like, where the hell do I know him
It was
from?
killing me. I tried to get into the movie, but I kept getting like, oh, where is this guy? I should have just paused and looked it up right there and then, but I digress.
I could have looked it up, but yeah, that's pretty cool. So now no, because now you answered my question, because I knew his face was familiar from somewhere.
He was good, yeah. Oh man, I just felt so sorry for this poor bastard to watch this film, but we'll get to that. But yeah, I like him and Alma. You said it. GR mentioned it. They had a lot of good chemistry. You could tell they were, they showed empathy and they were very curious about each other in the situation, but also suspicion. They really worked hard to make you get that little distrust going on between, okay, do we trust Alma or do we even trust Martin? Because they kept showing the instances where he was coughing and they kept, again, like I mentioned earlier, he said he had ringworms in the past, but he said he cleared it out. But clearly there's a scene within his time with Alma where they're stuck. It's like a storm. They're underneath a tent. They got some shelter, and he lifts up his shirt, and you see he still has the ringworm, and he's kind of like putting some ointment on it. So then, oh man, do I trust Martin? But then later on, do I trust Alma? I love the way this dynamic of back and forth, keeping you on your toes, and I was invested. I was like, I really want to know what's going to happen with these two characters. Now,
but think about it.
Yes,
Hold
sir.
on. Think about it. Alma is leading somebody to this spot. She's literally, it's her. Yes, that is her job. However, she's got to know who she's walking with. So it's normal human nature to have questions.
Yeah.
And kind of be, like just not essentially giving trust, So she acted actually normal. Because if I were in her spot, I'd want to know who's because Martin's always walking behind her. She's in the lead. So wouldn't you want to know who's walking behind you?
Yeah. And
But
the way the filmmakers structured this, they wanted you to kind of be a little wary of Martin because he's hiding something, obviously.
Yes.
But remember, she kind of told him already, oh, I know about you about the letter she wrote to you. Because she read all the letters.
Mm.
And then when they get into that one spot where she removes the drop box, there's no letter in there. So there was a lot of foreshadowing in this movie. A lot.
Yeah. These two are not the only two characters in the film. Obviously, they do run into a couple of one very what's the word here? Eccentric. That's exactly what I was looking for. What I like about it, this film did give you that feel of isolation. So when you do run into other characters, it's like, wow, like there's other people here. So Zach and Dr. Wendell are two characters that we do run into within the story. And I think this is where you become a fan or it loses you at this point. So we will get there. Joe, so tell us about Zach and Dr. Wendell. Whichever you want to tackle first, it's on you.
All right. So I'm a first name basis person. So Dr. Wendell, as I keep reviewing, I'm going to mention her name is Olivia. Her name is Dr. Olivia Wendell. So that way, as you're listening to us, when I mention Olivia, that's who I'm speaking of. So first of all, when you first are introduced to this character, there's this weird thing about the fact that she is using lights and sound frequencies to disrupt your senses. And she's basically causing you vertigo because, JR is going to speak about Zach, but, prior to Zach or after Zach showing up, you meet Olivia. And Olivia, even Olivia's introduction is, as I said, she uses these two methods that even is a cause of vertigo for yourself introducing to her. So Olivia, as I mentioned earlier, is one of the scientists working in the outpost, working with fungi. When Martin and Alma enter the area, Martin knows that they're in Olivia's area because he recognizes the myocordial mat. He mentions this. It's another part that plays prevalent to this movie. And as I mentioned earlier, that she's out there researching the fungi. Olivia sets up speakers and light systems, which she feels is a way to speak to the woods. I mentioned this because originally when she was out there to study the fungus, and then now she's studying the woods and what she learns from Zach. But as you watch the movie, you also start watching that Olivia slowly starts to become unraveled. And Olivia strayed away from her studies. She is now working on this ritual. And the more you get to see her, the more you get to see she comes undone. So I wonder if it was kind of exposure to the fungi, or does she actually start believing more into the ritual, which we come later to find out as Junior is about to discuss Zach, that Olivia was married to Zach, which is another little thing in this whole story.
Before I get into this guy, Zach, who, let me tell you, Reese Shearsmith did a hell of a job with this character, but watch it on Hulu because at this point in our review, spoilers are going to let loose. So watch the movie now. Funny thing is, we meet Zach before we meet any of the other characters in the film. The opening sequence is Zach prepping up his little traps.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And as you're watching it, you think, maybe it's just somebody,
I thought it was Martin at first, when I first saw the film.
So did I.
Yeah.
The fact that Zach is the one that sets this whole thing into motion. Now, when we meet, that's the first time we actually see Zach in a way. But when we first really meet him, he's like sitting in the middle of the woods.
Hold on. Mind fucking blown. That's how Martin cut his foot.
Yes.
Oh my god.
Yes.
Damn.
Yes, dude. I'm telling you, this thing has a lot.
I'm sorry, I jumped ahead, but that just blew my mind just now.
Nah, when we actually get to meet Zach, he's literally sitting in the middle of the woods, looking into God knows what. Stands up, turns around, and you got Alma and Martin. At this point, Martin stepped on a shard that Zach set up earlier in the opening sequence, when he breaks a piece of rock and puts a shard and beds in the ground, which caused a nice slash on Martin's foot. So we meet Zach, and I mean, very eccentric character. I mean, his personality was to the point. I mean, he had a little sarcasm in him, but he meets Alma and Martin, invites them back into his tent, but he lets them believe that he basically left society and is now living in the woods. So right off the get-go, he tries to play with them a little bit, and he sits down, he treats Martin's wound as they're sitting there.
That was a terrible scene, by the way.
Huh?
That was a terrible scene. We was sewing him. Oh my god. I held on to my own foot during that scene.
Yes, and then he gives them this little concoction that he makes, and he drugged them up. So one of the cool scenes in this film is as they're sitting there, drugged up, he's playing a guitar. And he's
I knew you were gonna say that.
He's like, you should rest. You should sleep. You should rest. You got Martin literally just coming out. Yeah, you should rest.
He sang him a lullaby.
You should rest. Sleep. Right. And he kept this up for like a minute straight, which is amazing. Now, what we find out about Zach is he is also Olivia's research partner and husband. And to top it off, he takes their research to a different level where now he thinks this thing is actually a man.
Parnak Feg.
But he thinks it's a man. Now, Parnak Feg takes 3 different incarnations in this film. At the beginning sequence, we're led to believe it's a female. In Zach's sequence, we're led to believe it's a male.
Yep.
In Olivia's sequence, we're led to believe is
unknown. Yes.
Omnipotent is everything. So, right. But with Zach's research, he believes in this whole thing of, he's trying to prove his worth to this thing, for it to talk to him, for it to communicate to him. But at the same time, he believes he could hear it, he could feel it. So Zach kind of believes in this ritual so much that he takes photography of them. He sets them up in these little positions because he believes photography is the way to show this thing in the woods, like this is its vision. So he's at the point where this is where I kind of tied it Midsommar a little bit to it, is the fact that he's turning this thing into a cult where he wants to make a religion out of it. He believes everybody is coming to him.
Yeah. So I'm going to mention one thing because I didn't hear you say this, because as we keep talking through this, it's going to prove to what I'm trying to bring up. One of the shots they show when Zach brings Alma and Martin to the house, you see a field of poppies. Zach also lives next to a field of poppies. This is going to come into play in some of as the rest of the episode goes on. But I was curious to see if you yourself noticed that, JR, that the place he set up, when you got a good pan shot of where he was at, there was a field of poppies in your sight of see where he was at.
Well, even when he's making a concoction, he's trying. He names all these different flowers because he didn't want to name the exact flower it was. And one of the funny
doesn't mention poppies.
And one of the funny scenes in his tent was where he looks at Mara and goes, "Wow, that thing looks bad. Maybe we got to amputate your leg. Maybe just a toe. Maybe just 2 toes." So you have Martin basically begging him not to do it. You have Alma yelling him not to do it. The first thing he goes, see, I missed. That's your fault. That's your fault. I can't concentrate.
No. The first one, your fault. I got the first one was like, no, I'm just getting my timing good. I'm getting ready.
He did. It was like it was fucked up. It's like I'm gonna do this, but hold on, let me make sure I get it right.
Yeah.
It's a practice shot. I'm not gonna get your toes though.
It took him like 4 times because when he gets to the toe, bam, he goes, "Oh man, I got half of it." See, that's your fault. That's your fault. He goes again. He blames Martin. I mean, for me, Zach was just a classic character, and he kind of embodied what this film was kind of about, as far as like his views of what's out there and how it kind of like does a full circle with Olivia.
This point of the film, from the beginning up until they met Zach, I was interested. I was invested. I want to know where this story is gonna go. Once they met Zach, and this line, which I love, they threw in there when they wanted to keep their distance from one another because the whatever pandemic's going on, you know what I'm saying? And they were like, yeah, that's a good idea. We all relate to that right now.
Yeah.
And then when they got into Zach's little makeshift his tent, his what would you call that guy's
they
shelter or whatever,
they use it, they use a name for it, but they did use a name.
His shelter where he's at right now.
Yeah.
He's got his workshop here, he's got his personal belongings here, and he sat there like you mentioned. He sewed up my man Martin, which was a great scene.
Terrible. It wasn't great.
Yeah,
it was a great scene. It was a great scene, but it was terrible because as you're watching, as you can see what he's doing,
yeah,
you physically felt that.
Well, let me tell you, I
don't know about you guys, but me,
I'm a simple guy. Like when I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but I'm just the scene. I just love this so much because he sewed him up. He gave him like both pairs of shoes or boots to wear. He fed them. Just this camaraderie between the three of them. I love that. Like, oh man, all right, yes. This is the third guy to the group. I bought into a hook, line, and sinker. I was all in, the team, triple threat here, So I'm like, oh man, I love this. I love this chemistry between the three characters. I love Zach because he's so down to earth. He's chill. He's laid back. He knows what's going on. He invites them over.
Rick, basically, what you're saying is that you would have fell for Zach.
I would have fell for his.
You would have, yeah.
His charm.
You would have fell for Zach's charm. That's a good way of putting it.
I would have. And as soon as he started strumming on the acoustic guitar, verse.
That was creepy as hell.
Yes, and that's when I was like. All of a sudden, like that Kill Bill theme, my head started popping up. Oh no, not Zach! No, he got me.
Well, what about when they escaped though? I mean, it's when they escaped and hit him over the head.
Yeah,
he has this massive gash right here, and that scene where he goes Martin. Also,
you see it. It's just
I was like, oh my god, he's like, Martin. He stopped for me. He's like, Martin. I mean, that dude was he was awesome.
And then all of a sudden comes when he starts taking the pictures and posing them in different poses and talking about developing the film. And got like you mentioned Midsummer. Yeah, I did kind of get it's what it was. It's the pagan influences,
pagan rituals. They're pagan rituals.
That was
which it's folklore.
Yes, that's what I love. The folklore was cool because that is grounded, in my opinion, in the sense of reality where that could happen. People do have these strong beliefs.
I'm about to talk about that.
So exactly. So Joe, talk about this ritual, the folklore. Give it to us.
All right. So there was a mention of Parnak Feg early in the film. It's the wood of the spirits. It's their folklore. As I looked a little more into the movie, I did realize this is Irish. So I originally thought it was British, but it turned out to be Irish. Actually, Irish make really great folklore movies. Martin sees the picture of, as you guys said, him earlier, because it turns out to be a her or unknown. But originally, of him earlier at the Gatton Lodge, where Alma meets him, and Alma gives Martin a little bit briefing into Parnak Feg, and she's referring to a necromancer who had been chased into the woods and ended up becoming the spirit of the woods. So both Olivia and Zach believe that they have their own way of speaking to Parnak Feg. So this movie is a lot about science versus spirituality. And I mean, that's pretty much almost a common denominator in many, many things, because you can scientifically answer something, but you can also spiritually answer something. So yes, like I said, this movie for me, even though you met Martin and Alma, the movie actually turned out to be more of Olivia versus Zach, science versus spirituality.
For me, I'm not the target audience for this kind of film. Like I said, up the first 40 minutes was great, but once it got into like the sound and like all this weird imagery, and it gives you a warning in the beginning of the film too. Yes. If you suffer from seizure, there's a lot of
they do.
So, and there's a lot of it. I mean, whenever I see those warnings, I'm like, oh, come on, man. But no, this warranted that because
Yeah, no.
this movie, if you're not used to that, it's gonna throw you off.
Well, it was mentioned earlier in the movie with Alma, where she was talking about the folklore and how in the 1970s, a bunch of kids went into woods and they went missing. So she mentioned how the town would actually use it to keep kids, going from the woods. Now, once again we rotate to Zach, who, let's forget, remember one scene where he actually, when he took the pictures with them, of them dressing all white, there's one that he's actually laying with them too. He covered his eyes too. It was actually when he did that.
Out of curiosity, did you really think, because here's the thing, when I saw that shot, I actually thought, because earlier they mentioned that a family had gone missing. So I thought it was the family that he is using that shot. So you think he was in that shot?
Oh, he was in the shot because the family was already dead.
Okay.
I think Olivia took that picture of him when he's laying on the ground because he had nothing to hold it up.
Oh, I didn't even think about that. Okay. That makes more sense for me now.
Yes, Olivia and Zach were in this all the way through. Because earlier in the let's backtrack a little bit. Earlier in the movie, where Alma and Martin are actually sleeping in tents, they get attacked. Now you're led to believe that Zach attacked both of them, but when you actually hear the sound, they're both getting hit at the same time. So they were both in on this whole thing from the get-go.
Oh my God.
Zach wanted to idolize it. He wanted to make it into a god. Whereas Olivia wants to protect it because what's the best thing to protect? Mother Nature. Because Mother Nature is what gives. And this is a thing that lives in the woods. It wants to live in peace. It gives to humanity. Whereas Zach, he's already in the midst of making his own religion because he wants this to take over everything. I mean, he even mentions how, look at the word you left out there, tomorrow. I mean, look at what we have here. So
this makes sense of something that Olivia had said, is that Zach, I'm hoping I can pronounce it right, idoltary.
Mm-hmm.
How man has a way of idoltaring it. That just literally, that where her saying that and what you just said made that part all sense.
And Martin, the poor bastard. This guy here, aside from like stepping on that, what was it? A little rock, a sharpened rock he put in there. He messed up his foot. He had to get it sewn with no anesthesia, nothing. Then after that, obviously he gets drugged up, beat around. Then he lost some toes in the most horrific way possible. Like that scene was great. Like the fact that just the way the tension build on that scene was good. And then, oh man, then he's got to get it the room cauterized. Oh my god,
yeah, that was terrible.
Oh, bad. I mean, this guy just went through hell with his foot. I felt so bad for the guy. But then, of course, on top of that, he had the ringworms. I mean, like GR, like this came up early in the film. He's hiding something. Then it comes up later on as a main plot point in the film. Walk us through that right now.
So when Martin found Olivia's camp, they're trying to convince her to let's get out of here where she wants to stay. So there's a rock that we see earlier in the film that has one opening in it. And she's by this rock and she's talking about the rock and stuff. And then, Martin's saying how, he just couldn't stop thinking about her. Then she starts mentioning, did you have ringworms? And he goes, he just looks at her and she goes, yeah. So did me and Zach. And, and I don't know, something about the ringworms caused something chemistry with our body that we kind of veered towards things like obsession and love. I mean, it was kind of a weird analogy how she put this, but yeah, it's just it was very vague at first, but then this kind of you're like, huh. I mean, what's up with these ringworms?
The thing with the ringworms, though, is that when Olivia asks Martin about the ringworm, she also mentions that Zach had also had ringworm. So the ringworm for me, as I mentioned earlier, one of the topics in this movie is what Olivia is there to study, which is the fungi. So ringworms is a fungi, basically. So the ringworm that appeared on both Martin and Zach brought them to Olivia to where she was at. And she mentioned that. She said Zach said the same. She asked Martin, why did you come here? And he started saying all the reasons why. But it was shortly after he had gotten the ringworm. So, Olivia was working with fungus. Both of them get a fungus, and it's basically calling them back home. But along the movie, you're kind of realizing the specialty that Martin may play into this because, it was the way I looked at it was not that the ringworm was calling Martin to Olivia, but the ringworm was calling Martin home.
That's when the movie kind of like lost me a bit. It just got way too out there. Why the ringworm? Like, why was that a factor? And if it drew Olivia and Zach out there, how did they get rid of it? Once they get there, it goes away. Like, I don't.
Well, no, like I said, Olivia's out there studying fungus.
So they're around it, and she caught
the
it.
ringworm is a fungus.
Yeah.
So like it all ties kind of.
So how did Martin get it then?
How did what?
How did Martin get it?
But they don't actually. Again,
yeah, it's
one
tough.
of those things this movie does not do.
Yeah. Okay. So
is explain to you anything. It doesn't give you a whole lot of pre-context before we get to what gets here.
We're gonna get into like the closing moments of this film here because, like I said, I loved it until a certain point. Like when I mentioned I'm not the target audience, I don't like to always be guessing what's going on or what am I seeing. I don't want to watch a film 4 or 5 times to get everything. I don't think that should be a requirement. Some people like that, and it's not a bad thing. But for me personally, it's just too much. Like they use a lot of imagery to kind of tell the story near the end, but to me, it's just so confusing. I just couldn't understand what was going on. I'm hoping Joe start this off. Right now. I'm at a loss. I will admit it. Please, it's okay. Me and the Horror Fiend TV viewers. What the fuck happened in the end of the film?
All right, so this is probably where the movie is going to get the most divisive for almost anyone, and try to follow me along my own thought process on here. All right, so Olivia is telling them that she's found a way to speak to the woods. This kind of a little bit reminded me of M. Night Shyamalan's 2008's The Happening, where basically nature was speaking to each other.
Yep.
Right. So Olivia had explained how originally before we didn't see this in the movie, how the woods try to keep Zach away from her by using a cloud of fungi spores, which we now later see come on later on, which Olivia tells them.
We didn't get into that. Good call.
Yeah, Olivia tells them that the last time this happened, it was trying to keep Zach away. So Alma, trying to basically get him help, decides to walk through this. She's tied through this. So this is going to tie into what I mentioned earlier about Zach living next to a field of poppies. Alma walks through a field of poppies that have now been, I guess, what's a good word I can use here? The fungi
was disturbed. They walked through it.
The fungi actually had helped make the poppy stronger. Because the whole reason that Olivia is there is to find out a way to make this fungi make crops,
Isn't it like a symbiote? Like a symbiote. They work together to give mutual benefits, right?
Yes.
For me, it was kind of ironic that the 3 people that were supposed to be the core of this so-called ritual all failed, only because the only one that actually felt anything was Alma, who just happened to be the one who knew the woods a little bit more than anybody did.
Mm-hmm.
Who, yes, she got the effects of the poppies, which she said she didn't feel a being. She felt more like she was in his brain. And then to top it off, at the whole ending sequence, while she's, mind you, like wiping everybody out in the process of trying to, save Martin, she's the one that starts feeling everything. I mean, she's the one that basically who had nature. She was the only one that really knew nature, where you have everybody else who thought they knew nature. So for me, she's the one that felt the most effect. She's the one that actually felt everything. Zach didn't feel nothing. I mean, the fact that he convinced Olivia, who was all science all the way through, to buckle to him to use the book that they had to do the ritual. So she kind of caved into him. And Martin, once again, Martin was just a prop. I mean, the poor guy, man. The guy went through hell.
Yeah.
And top it off, like, he was almost killed like 4 or 5 times in this film. And he wasn't even the one that was the, how was it that Olivia said to him, you have such good flesh. But it was Alma the whole time that basically was the one that, I don't know, succeeded in the ritual because she felt everything.
For me, the ending kind of showed that Alma not necessarily died, but ascended, which is what both Olivia and Zach were hoping to do.
Well, the scene he's talking about for me was a classic. If you're a horror fan and you like gore, I mean, this scene was amazing. Once again, like, even Martin was the tool in this. Zach also took a beating because him and almost basically beating the crap out of Olivia. Zach comes to the rescue, turns around, he stabs him in the eye.
Oh.
And he's stared with this thing sticking out his eye. And he looks at it, he goes, hold up. That's how accidents happen. Like, this dude, man. He's like, that's how accidents happen. And then to make it even more comical, he goes, I think you need to take me to the hospital.
Yeah. He brought that back.
I mean, this dude sitting there like,
he's trying to pump in that eye.
He started taking out his leg. He lets it go.
Nope.
And she comes and whoosh, like, puts it right into his head.
Okay, so for me, the ritual was completed. As I still don't know what truly believe it happened in this movie, but for me, when Alma killed Zach, she sacrificed Zach for the ritual for Parnag Feg. And when Alma and Martin were at the stone, because if you notice at the end, when she was holding him, they were at the stone. And then before that, Olivia was sitting there looking like she was about to kill Martin. But then later on, you see her kind of walking on her own. That kind of reminded me of 1996's The Craft, when Nancy took Mano's power in and she kind of short-circuited. When she walked out and she goes, "Thank you."
No, sorry.
So it was like the power of what Parnag Fag she believed in overwhelmed her.
All right, well, we're gonna break this down for the final time. This has been quite the discussion. I came into this film, because I loved it. Then I lost me, but listening to everything I missed and everything I didn't get, I'm a little bit more excited about this film. I definitely want to watch it again. JR, 1 to 5, man. What you gotta say, bro?
For me, this movie's a slow grind. You have to pay attention to detail. I mean, once this guy shows up, I mean, the movie escalates even further. But for me, it's a good film. Understand when you're gonna watch it with patience. It's a slow build up to all the events. Watch every little thing. For me, I'm gonna give it 3.5 out of 5. I mean, it has some good things, has some bad things, but for me, it was very enjoyable.
Joey.
Well, for me, I feel that the movie left a lot on the table. Yeah. There was a lot that could have been explained. Ben Wheatley, who is the director of the movie, he did a good job on directing film. Cinematography, actually, I love the cinematography. No argument in that. It was greatly done. One of you guys mentioned the sound in the woods. So here's one thing I noticed is the fact that, and Martin mentioned it, is the birds. I walk my dogs in the morning. I can actually recognize a couple of the bird calls. And Alma mentions about an extra amount of birds in the movie. So they're investigating an area that is extremely fertilized. We don't know if it's the fungi. We don't know if it's the birds. So, I didn't know if there was a malevolent part of it, if it was spiritual. I'm going to give it a 3. I didn't hate it. I just wish in some other areas it was more given to me.
I get it. It's not my type of film, but I'm gonna give it a 3 out of 5 because of the acting. I loved it. Everyone nailed it. Zach in particular, like I said,
Yeah.
when he got introduced, I was ready to give this a 4.5 out of 5 and be like, I love this. But once the weirdness kicked in, it lost me. And that's not because it's a bad film, that's a personal preference. So I'm gonna go 3 out of 5. Right. And with that being said, I am Ricky Grimes. We have JR. We got Joe. 3 Corners of Horror. JR, why don't you tell us what's next on the menu, son?
We're going to visit another new film, one that has little bite to it. It's a 2020 film called Bloodthirsty. Now, yes, let's go into a different film with a little bit of animalistic savagery.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us. Hope you come back for Bloodthirsty. 3 Corners of Horror, Horror Fiend TV. Please like, subscribe, share with your friends. Hope you guys stay safe. Thank you for joining us. Peace.